The Asics Megablast versus the Nike Vomero Plus. Two max cushion performance trainers, but how do you choose which one is right for you? Before I jump into this one, I just want to say this. I think if you watch this channel, I think I become known as someone who definitely prefers a lower stack shoe, a shoe with a little bit more ground feel than the typical max cushion shoe. And it's not that I'm against max cushion shoes, I've just never run in one that really gave me the performance and the feel that I really have been looking for. They always are either too squishy and mushy, or they're just too all over the place, kind of bouncing everywhere all at once. But with these two shoes, I think it really shows really great engineering from Asics and Nike in how they fine-tune the geometry of shoes, the material selection, and most importantly, the foams they're putting into these shoes. Both of these shoes have really impressed me with their versatility and their balance and their feel, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And while I do still prefer a lower stack shoe that puts me closer to the ground, either one of these shoes I'll be happy to run quite a bit of volume in anytime. And as always with my versus videos, let's start with the specs. Now on paper, these two shoes are very similar, except for one key difference, and that's weight. The Asics Megablast is nearly 50 grams or 1.7 ounces lighter than the Nike Vomero Plus. And when you pick up these shoes and hold them in your hand, you notice that. When you put them on your feet initially, you notice that. When you start to run in these two shoes, you don't notice it as much as you would expect, because the balance of the Nike Vomero Plus is really well done. That shoe doesn't feel like there's any weight specifically in that shoe. It's definitely not bottom heavy, and it's really finely balanced around your foot where it feels like an extension of your leg, just like the Asics Megablast. So while the Asics Megablast is the lighter shoe, and from a performance standpoint, it is something you're aware of, and that's why the ride profile of the Megablast is springy versus resilient for the Nike Vomero Plus, which is using the dynamicness of the ZoomX foam quite a bit more. That's why these two shoes are actually quite even from the ride profiles. The other difference I'm going to say is the drop in the Asics Megablast is 8 mil. It feels 6 to 8 mil to me, but it just never feels like I'm really pushed up on my toes in that shoe. And in the Nike Vomero Plus, that's a classic 10 mil drop from Nike, but because the foam is much more compressive in that shoe, you sink into it a little bit more, and I will say it could feel closer to 8 depending on how you're weighting in that shoe. And looking at the contact patch and outsole of these two shoes, this is where you can see a similarity, but also a key engineering difference in how these two shoes are designed. The forefoot of both these shoes is very similar as far as the width. I would say as a forefoot striker, both these shoes have a nice sweet spot up in the forefoot. However, when you get into the waist of the shoe, the Asics Megablast is a little bit wider, but then when you get to the heel, the Asics Megablast is a little bit narrower. In the Nike Vomero Plus, you have that really pulled in waist and you have a wider heel, much more heel flaring on both the medial and lateral side in that shoe to give that more compressive ZoomX foam more stability. And I think this just speaks to the approach from an engineering standpoint of how the engineers are trying to make these shoes as stable as they can in a 45 mil stack height in the heel shoe. The other key difference is actually the outsoles, and you can see that very clearly. The Asics Megablast has that classic, really stripped down rubber and a lot of exposed foam that we're very familiar with all the Blast series shoes, and the Nike Vomero Plus has basically a full coverage of rubber on the outsole. However, I think the Nike Vomero Plus actually has learned something from previous Blast shoes from Asics in that there's two zones of rubber on that shoe. There's the outer lighter ring, and then there's that darker black ring in the middle. Those function independently, and they give you a little bit more structure on the rails of the shoe, and I think they make the center of the shoe a little bit softer, very much like what that really stripped down rubber on the Blast series from Asics has always done, by putting a lot of exposed foam in contact with the ground and putting as minimal rubber on the outsole of that shoe, just as much as you need to make it functional. That gives you a very compliant soft feel on the ground, but it actually gives you the protection of the outsole or the Asics grip rubber where you need it. I think both these shoes work extremely well. I think the Megablast probably has one of the best performing Blast outsoles that I've seen. The other perk is the FF Turbo Squared foam in the Asics Megablast is very durable, and I'm not seeing any real wear on that. And the Asics grip rubber is also very grippy and very durable, so I'm also not seeing a lot of wear on that. Both these will work very well for all types of road running, wet to dry, hot, sticky weather, and light dirt roads, some gravel paths. Though I think if you're primarily running on softer surfaces, dirt, gravel, even light trails, the Nike Vomero Plus is going to be the better option, but the Asics Megablast will actually do better than you would expect it to. Starting at the uppers on these two shoes, I actually really love both these uppers, but they could not be further apart. On the Asics Megablast, we have what Asics is calling an engineered mesh upper. However, this upper material is, to me, the same material that used to be on the old Metaspeed Plus series a few generations back, or the wonderful Magic Speed 3, meaning this is a very race-oriented upper, though there are a lot of comforts built into this shoe. Whereas on the Nike Vomero Plus, we have a two-layer engineered mesh, meaning close to the foot there is a sock-like booty that wraps around the foot. It's very soft on the foot, and then that's contained by a secondary layer on the outside, which is a very fine mesh, which structures and contains the foot and actually gives you the performance and the lockdown that you need in a shoe like this. Both of these shoes have very padded ankle collars and Achilles flare. There's a deep pocket in both of these to lock your heel down. I don't see any problems with heel lift in either one of these shoes. The eyelet chain is very simple in both these shoes. It's very effective, but the tongue is where there are some differences. In the Asics Megablast, we have a very thin tongue that has the most minimal amount of padding at the top to protect you from when you tie your laces, whereas in the Nike Vomero Plus, you have a very padded tongue that's definitely going to protect your foot from any type of lace bite. However, as I said, both these shoes have really great lockdown, so you don't really need to crank the laces in either one of these shoes. From a fit standpoint, I would consider both of these a performance fit, meaning they have very good lockdown that holds your foot into this big midsole to allow you to do a range of paces in either one of these shoes. In the Asics Megablast, I would consider this borderline race fit, race upper, though there's definitely some comforts around the ankle and the heel to make this more of a trainer, but the rest of the shoe definitely fits more race-like, whereas the Vomero Plus gives you a lot of performance, gives you great lockdown, but there's definitely more comfort in this shoe. I would not consider either one of these shoes wide. However, if you have a wide foot, the Vomero Plus from Nike is probably the better option because the upper material is going to give more in this shoe, and there is a wide version of this shoe available. Whereas in the Asics Megablast, this upper material, as I called it, the old Motion Wrap 1.0 material, is a non-stretch material. So you may get a little bit more volume in this upper when the midsole packs in and the insole packs in just a little bit. You'll get a few more millimeters, but you're never going to get more width in this shoe. I would say from a volume standpoint, both these shoes have really nice volume in the toe box. There is a toe bumper that's in both these shoes. The Megablast feels like it's a little bit taller. I've had no toenail issues or toe bumping at all in either one of these shoes. Again, very good fit, very good lockdown, and very performance oriented in both of them. And finally, ending on sizing, I went true to size, US men's size 9 in both these shoes, and I'm very happy with the fit in both of them. I will say that they're both a little long, so they're giving me a little bit more room in front of my big toe than typically I want, especially in a shoe that's a little bit more performance oriented, but the lockdown of these two shoes is excellent. So I would not recommend going up half a size at all in either one of these shoes. However, the Asics Megablast is definitely the more performance or borderline race fit, where the Nike Vomero Plus is what I still consider performance oriented, but it's definitely more towards the training fit. So if you want more comfort, more softness, that's the Nike Vomero Plus. If you want more performance, closer to a race shoe, that's the Asics Megablast. And moving to the midsole of both these shoes, they're actually very similar in this regard in that they're both one piece of performance foam underfoot. There's no plate, no shank, no rods, no carrier foam, which means there's no glue layer. These are both one piece of performance foam in each. And that's why you're buying a shoe like this, a 45 mil stack height shoe in the heel, to get all of this wonderful foam. In the Asics Megablast, this is a new foam from Asics. It's a new ATPU training foam called FF Turbo Squared, which is really nice. I would say the closest comparison I can make to this foam is older Lightstrike Pro, what I call Lightstrike Pro Classic, what we've seen for years. However, this is a little bit firmer. There's not quite as much sink in FF Turbo Squared as there is in Lightstrike Pro Classic. In the Nike, this is classic Zoom X foam. This is the training variant of Zoom X foam. And this is definitely the more bouncy, softer foam between these two shoes. Though there still isn't a endless sink in this shoe. There's more sink in the Nike Vomero Plus, but there's definitely a really comfortable Zoom X signature rebound in this shoe. Whereas the rebound in the Asics Megablast is very spring-like. That's the real comparison I make to Lightstrike Pro Classic. This is a weight it and you get a sudden spring, where this is a strike, absorb, there's a slight delay, and then you get that bounce out. That's just a very classic Zoom X feel. Again, I made this comparison between Nike and Adidas in the past. I think it's relevant now between Nike and Asics in that FF Turbo Squared is more like a spring, again, compression, sudden release, whereas the Zoom X foam and the Nike Vomero Plus is much more like a yoga ball. You strike, compress, and then you bounce out. Very, very different feels, but I think they both get the job done very well in these two shoes. And finally, let's talk about stability in both these shoes, because this is a subject that I'm hearing over and over with these newest generation of max cushion shoes. Now keep in mind, these are 45 mil stack heights in the heel. These are very, very tall shoes. You're only going to get so much stability in these two shoes. However, the engineering teams from Asics and Nike have really worked to make these as stable as they possibly can. In the Asics Megablast, I think that's resulted in a very wide but very comfortable and still very nimble midsole. You can see a lot of sculpting on both the medial and lateral side. There's a lot of foam that hangs out to the sides of the foot. That's giving you a lot of stability. Also, the firmer FF Turbo Squared foam in the shoe is also giving you much more inherent stability in the Asics Megablast. I think it works really well. However, this shoe never feels bulky. It never feels wide. It never feels like a big shoe. This still feels very nimble. And what's really nice is that this FF Turbo Squared foam does give you a little ground feel. So you do get some proprioceptive feedback in this shoe. So you do know where your foot is in space, and you're getting as much stability as they can put into a shoe that's this tall. In the Nike Vomero Plus, I would say this is the less stable option between these two shoes because Zoom X foam is just much more compressive. However, Nike has designed and engineered quite a bit into this midsole to make it as stable as they possibly can. They've added the wide heel flaring both on the medial and lateral side, and they've also built up a lot of the foam around the heel. This shoe looks so tall in the heel because I would say a big chunk of this foam right here is actually going up over and around your heel. So the Nike Vomero Plus definitely is giving you more of that bucket seat feel in the heel to try to stabilize this softer, more compressive foam. I think it works really well. If you prioritize stability though, the Asics Megablast is the more stable option between these two shoes. However, stability is something that's very personal. I sometimes do want to run in a shoe that maybe doesn't have the most stability because I want to train my leg, my lower leg, my ankle to be stronger so that I can actually work with the unstable shoe. So a shoe like the Nike Vomero Plus, which I would consider inherently stable, but it is a little wobbly because of the softer foam, is a great option to train stability. Whereas if you just want to prioritize stability, you don't want to deal with that at all, the Asics Megablast is about as stable as you're going to get in a shoe with a foam that is this dynamic and this tall. Let's talk about the ride of these two shoes. As I said in the intro, I'm someone who typically likes a lower stacked shoe that makes me feel more connected to the ground because it feels more nimble. I can feel my foot work more in that type of shoe. However, both these shoes actually give me a level of ground feel, which is surprising for a shoe that has 37 or 35 mil of foam in the forefoot, and they give me proprioceptive feedback so I do know where my foot is in space. That was really surprising to me. I'm not running max cushion shoes that really do that to me. And I think the simplicity of the midsoles in both these shoes, the fact that they're just one piece of foam, there isn't a glue layer, there isn't a plate, there isn't a shank, there isn't anything else getting between you and the road, is really what makes both these shoes feel so direct. I find both these shoes work very well for steady into threshold running, so a little bit faster than easier pace and getting into or around your marathon pace. I think both these shoes do really well. Though I'm going to say the Asics Megablast, because it's the lighter option, the more racy option, the more performance-oriented option, I think this shoe can go past threshold into tempo running, and it does it surprisingly well. I've taken the Asics Megablast closer to 5K pace, and I've had absolutely no problem. In fact, I would actually pick this shoe to do that type of running in, especially if I was putting 5K pace into a longer run. This would be an ideal shoe for that. It's not the Nike Vomero Plus can't do that, but once I got faster than maybe half marathon pace in this shoe, definitely over 10K pace, it just felt like there's too much shoe. This ZoomX foam is definitely softer, more dynamic, but it's really tuned for marathon, half marathon, possibly into 10K pace for a lot of runners. I think that's really where this shoe wants to be the happiest. I also think people look at max cushion shoes as really just exclusively a recovery shoe option. And I'm going to say that I don't really like either one of these as a recovery shoe. I think both of them will work fine. I just want something that's a little bit more flexible when I'm doing a real recovery run because I want to actually work out all the kinks in my foot. So both these shoes can do that. Honestly, I do think the Asics Megablast is a little bit better for slower running. I think the directness of this foam just works a little bit better. You don't get quite as lost as you do in the Nike Vomero Plus. I just think it works a little bit better. And that sounds counterintuitive because this is the firmer, more direct shoe. But again, that's kind of what I want in a recovery run anyway. Another way of explaining this is with my performance matrix. So if we take the Asics Megablast and the Nike Vomero Plus and we put them both on here, this is what we get. As you can see, a ton of overlap between these two shoes. However, the Asics Megablast I think has a little bit more top end, and I think it does really well on the top end. For completely max effort, like a track workout or something, it's probably not the shoe that I'm going to reach for. But if I'm going to, again, include something like 5K pace or maybe even do a couple 400s inside of a longer run just to get the legs moving, to get the fast twitch muscles going on a longer run, the Asics Megablast is the ideal shoe for that because it's max cushion. It does really well for those longer distances, but again, it has that performance in it. I think it does really well. Whereas with the Vomero Plus from Nike, I think that shoe just really wants to be in that steady threshold range, and I think that's where it's happiest in. And as I said, I think the directness of the Asics Megablast actually makes it better for truly easy running, like we're talking recovery shuffle running. Again, I want a more direct shoe for that. I want to feel my foot work a little bit more. It's the point of a recovery run is to work out the kinks. So I definitely want the more direct, firmer option, and that's why I would reach for the Asics Megablast. And lastly, I need to mention something that I rarely talk about on this channel, but that's price. The Asics Megablast is priced at $225 US, where the Nike Vomero Plus is priced at $180 US. That is a considerable difference, to the point where I think the biggest misstep about the Asics Megablast is Asics' pricing of this shoe. I think it is totally off base, and I do think it's too expensive for what this shoe actually is. You're getting a great shoe, you're getting a great foam, you're getting a great fit, you're getting a ton of performance, but it's totally mispriced given all the other shoes in this class, which are all around 180 USD. So if you like everything I'm saying about the Asics Megablast and you prioritize stability in a max cushion shoe, and that's what you're really looking for, I think a good alternative to that is actually this, the Nike Vomero 18. I think the Vomero 18 gives you the same level of stability that you're getting in the Asics Megablast, not the same level of performance. You're definitely getting more performance in this shoe, but for general running as a general trainer, I think you're still getting a lot of value out of the Nike Vomero 18. Also, the Nike Vomero 18 is priced at 165 USD, which I think makes it a much better value for what you actually need in an all-around daily trainer. Again, the stability between these two shoes is similar. The Asics Megablast is still more stable. However, they're very close. If you look at the specs between these two shoes, you can see that. The biggest difference is that the Vomero 18 is definitely the heavier shoe. It's even heavier than the Vomero Plus. However, it's still very well balanced, and it still isn't a shoe that feels bottom heavy, though you are going to notice the weight difference. But again, unless you're going between the two shoes back-to-back days, you're never really going to know that. The balance of the Vomero 18 is actually quite nice. The ride profile for the Vomero 18 is plush. Again, a little lower performance, but I think for general running, I think it's probably a little bit better option, and you're getting most of the stability. And if we look at the performance matrix for all three of these shoes, you can see that the Vomero 18 definitely likes that easy into steady and just touching into threshold, maybe max effort running. I'm actually surprised how capable the shoe is, but it's definitely happy in that easy, steady, definitely the full range of steady into threshold. So even though the Asics Megablast is an outstanding shoe, the price of the shoe is just too high. And while this shoe is very capable and it's probably going to take the place of 2, maybe 3 shoes in your rotation, so the value you actually get by spending that amount on this shoe is maybe justified, the pricing of the shoe is totally off. So that's where the Vomero 18 is a really great option as an alternative to the wonderful Asics Megablast. The fact that at the end of 2025 we have 2 max cushion shoes that have 45 mil of foam in the heel, which is a ton of foam, that have this much versatility and this much performance, really has shown that max cushion trainers have really come a long way, because just a year or 2 ago, max cushion trainers were really just heavy, mushy, or spongy shoes that didn't really have that level of performance. But here we are now, and both these shoes are outstanding, and I'm really happy both these exist. And for someone like me who likes lower stack, more minimalist shoes, I'm really happy that I can reach for these when I want this type of shoe. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for our merch or click the join button below. If neither one of those options are good for you, leave a comment, leave a like, because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.